Imagine waking up. The digital clock beside your bed glows this harsh red 3 a.m.
Right, the classic witching hour.
Exactly. And the room around you is just steeped in this heavy, suffocating silence. It's the kind of quiet that feels almost physical, like it's pressing against your eardrums.
Oh yeah, that heavy pressure.
Right. So you try to shift your weight, maybe roll over and just glance at the bedroom door, but your body flatly refuses to respond. The signal from your brain to your muscles it completely vanishes into a void.
Which is terrifying.
It is. You're completely, terrifyingly paralyzed. And then, as your eyes adjust to the ambient darkness, you see it. Standing perfectly still in the threshold of your doorway is a shadowy silhouette.
And it's not just a normal shadow either.
No, not at all. It's not just a shadow cast by a street lamp outside. It actually absorbs the meager light in the room. It stretches like 6, maybe 8 feet tall, entirely dominating the frame of the door.
Just towering over you.
Yeah, and it's wearing a long, flowing garment, like an old trench coat or a heavy cape. And resting right on top of its head is a wide-brimmed hat.
The signature hat.
Exactly. It has no face, just this featureless void where human expression should be. Though, you might perceive the faint, terrifying suggestion of 2 hollow, sunken sockets.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe glowing amber eyes.
And it doesn't move.
Right? It isn't moving towards you. It isn't speaking. It doesn't make a single sound. But, with this absolute primal certainty echoing in your chest, that it is watching you.
It's a scenario that sounds, frankly, entirely constructed, like a trope pulled directly from the climax of a psychological horror film.
It really does.
But for countless individuals across the globe, separated by vast oceans, disparate languages, and entire centuries, this is not just a piece of fictional narrative media. It's a documented, intimately lived, and severely traumatizing experience.
Yeah.
The sheer granular consistency of the specific visual encounter is what elevates it from, a mere bad dream to a profound physiological and psychological mystery. We aren't just talking about a vague sense of unease here.
Right. We're talking about thousands of unconnected people waking up to find the exact same entity wearing the exact same clothes standing in their room.
Exactly.
So, welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is highly specific, and to be entirely upfront with you, it is dark. We are going to decode one of the most terrifying, universally shared anomalies of the human mind.
We're tracking an entity colloquially known as the Hatman.
The Hatman. And we really need to set the tone immediately for you. There are going to be no lighthearted detours today. We are embarking on an intense, forensic exploration of the incredibly fragile border between waking life, nightmare, and chemical delirium.
And to crack this phenomenon open, we are synthesizing a massive, incredibly diverse stack of source material. We're looking at this through every possible lens.
Which we have to do because it's so complex.
Right. We have peer-reviewed medical journals detailing the intricate neurophysiology of sleep paralysis, specifically looking at the temporoparietal junction.
We've got those alarming clinical toxicology reports, too.
Yes, from addiction centers regarding neuropharmacology, specifically focusing on a terrifying rise in chemical abuse. Plus, we're pulling data from deep-cut internet meme encyclopedias that track digital folklore, reviewing analyses of paranormal documentaries, and tracing historical accounts that span thousands of years of human civilization.
It's a lot. We are basically looking at what happens when the human brain turns against itself, and why, out of all the possible shapes a hallucination could take, the brain consistently chooses this exact, terrifying mid-century silhouette to project into the darkness.
That's the core mystery, yeah.
So if this exact figure has been stalking the human mind for so long, we need to start by locking down the physical anatomy of this shared nightmare. Based on the aggregate of global reports, including those incredibly detailed accounts in the sources we reviewed, who or what is the Hatman? Let's look at the physical characteristics first.
Okay, so the physical descriptors provided by witnesses are strikingly, almost impossibly uniform. We're consistently talking about a pure black, towering silhouette.
Right.
The height is routinely reported at around 6 to 8 feet tall. Often, witnesses say it requires the entity to stoop slightly if it enters a modern room.
Oh, wow. That's just a horrifying image.
It is, but what's truly fascinating here, from a sensory perspective, is the reported texture of the apparition.
The texture.
Yeah. Witnesses frequently struggle to articulate it, but they describe the entity as being flatter than a normal shadow, yet somehow possessing intense depth.
That's a paradox. Flatter but deeper.
Exactly. Exactly. It occupies three-dimensional space in the bedroom, like it physically blocks out objects behind it, but it lacks distinct features or traditional human volume. People often describe it as a living void or a localized patch of absolute darkness that light simply fails to penetrate.
Just a black hole in the shape of a person. And then there is the wardrobe. This is the detail that truly separates the Hatman from generic amorphous shadow people that are, pretty common in sleep disturbance.
All right, the clothes are key.
Witnesses explicitly note the entity is wearing very specific formal clothing. It's almost always a hat, most commonly described as a fedora with a distinct brim, a Homburg, a rounded bowler, or sometimes even a taller cylindrical stovepipe hat, resembling like 19th century formal wear.
And it's always paired with the coat.
Inextricably paired. Depending on the witness, it's described as a heavy trench coat, a thick wool overcoat, or a sweeping cape that reaches down past the knees.
Furthermore, while the entity is predominantly described as faceless, just a smooth, featureless oval of black beneath the brim of the hat, the terrifying variations that do exist in the historical record only serve to amplify the uniform horror.
Yeah, when features are perceived, they are just nightmarish.
Absolutely. Some reports detail glowing red or yellowish amber eyes staring out from the shadow. Others mention sunken, darkened sockets that look like a literal skull.
Huh.
And then there's a subset of deeply disturbed witnesses who report long, spider-like, clawed hands extending from the sleeves of the coat, straggly hair hanging down from beneath the hat, and, perhaps most disturbingly, a wide, unnatural, toothy grin.
Just full of sharp, jagged teeth gleaming in the dark.
Yes.
Then there's the behavioral profile. He rarely moves quickly, if at all right.
Almost never. The primary defining action of the Hatman is simply to observe. He's a watcher. He stands completely still, studying the witness with an intensity that causes physical dread.
And when the encounter ends, when he does finally leave, he doesn't just turn and walk out the door like a biological organism. Witnesses describe him slipping effortlessly through solid walls, vanishing instantly into the darkest corner of the room, or drifting backward down a hallway, fading into nothingness without his legs moving.
Right, he glides.
He never makes a sound. There are no footfalls on hardwood floors, just a silent, oppressive presence, followed by a silent retreat.
And to truly grasp the impact of this consistency and why it confounds researchers so much, we have to look at how these accounts emerge completely independently of one another.
Especially prior to the existence of the internet.
Exactly. One of our sources provides a profoundly chilling case study of this exact phenomenon, the 30-year-old drawing.
Oh, this specific story really anchors the mystery for me.
It's incredible.
So the reviewer details how, roughly 30 years ago, when they were just a teenager, they had a visceral encounter with this entity in their bedroom. It was such a profound, ominous, and scarring experience that they didn't just try to forget it. They actually took a pen and sketched the figure in the back of a notebook to process the trauma.
Which is a very normal psychological response to trauma.
Right. They showed the drawing to a single friend, eventually packed the notebook away in a cardboard box, put it up in their attic, and largely moved on with their life, just forgetting about the sketch for 3 decades.
Then jump forward 30 years. In the present day, this same individual sits down to watch a modern documentary about documented cases of the Hatman.
Yeah.
And as the documentary plays, the filmmakers begin showing these police sketch-style drawings submitted by strangers from all over the world, detailing their own sleep paralysis encounters. As these sketches flash across the screen, the reviewer realizes that they are looking at the exact creature they drew as a teenager.
I can't even imagine that feeling.
The reviewer and his wife actually pause the film, go up to the attic, dig through decades of old boxes, and retrieve that 30-year-old dust-covered notebook.
And the sketches are an identical match. But I want to emphasize that it wasn't just a superficial match of a generic shadow wearing a hat and a coat.
No, the details matched.
Exactly. The modern sketches submitted by total strangers featured the exact same sunken, blackened, cat-like eyes that the reviewer had drawn. They featured the exact same sharp, impossibly wide, toothy smile, the long, claw-like skeletal hands, the straggly, unkempt hair hanging beneath the brim.
It's unsettling.
Wait, I'm struggling to buy that this is purely coincidence. You're saying thousands of people from entirely different generations separated by decades hallucinate the exact same lapels on a trench coat, the exact same jagged teeth, entirely by chance. How is that statistically possible for an internal hallucination?
That is the defining question of this entire investigation.
Right.
Because if we assume, as the medical literature suggests, that this is entirely generated by the internal hardware of the brain, it implies something astonishing.
Which is?
It implies the human mind possesses a pre-programmed universal visual template for absolute terror.
Wow.
But before we dive into the specific neurobiology of how the brain constructs this image, we have to firmly establish that this isn't just some modern, culturally contagious phenomenon.
Because it's easy to blame the internet.
Right. While websites aggregating these stories date back to around 2001, the entity itself, or at least recognizable variations of it, has been haunting human consciousness for millennia. We are looking at a deeply embedded archetype.
Let's trace this back historically, looking at that Anatolian folklore mentioned in the sources.
The jinn.
Yeah, there is this deeply ingrained, centuries-old history in Turkey regarding encounters with entities known as jinn. The specific account details how modern and historical treasure hunters, operating in deep, isolated forests or excavating remote, ancient ruins under the cover of night, report seeing anomalous figures observing them from the tree line.
And what do they look like?
They describe seeing short, man-like figures. And incredibly, what are these woodland spirits reported to be wearing? Top hats, fedoras, formal structured suits, or long flowing robes?
What is absolutely crucial to extract from that Anatolian account is the specific reasoning provided by the local folklore.
The why.
Yes, the why. The legends don't just say, oh, demons wear hats. The folklore suggests that these specific entities, these jinn, are fundamentally shapeshifters. They are beings of unstable energy trying to exist in a physical space, but they struggle to mimic human features perfectly. Witnesses describe their movements as glitchy, unnatural, or stuttering. Their facial features, particularly their eyes, look profoundly off or poorly rendered.
Like a bad video game asset.
Exactly. So the folklore proposes that these entities wear these specific, highly formal human clothes, heavy suits, concealing robes, wide-brimmed hats, pulled low as a functional disguise.
Oh, that makes sense.
They use the rigid structure of human formal wear to cover or literally ground their shifting, unstable, horrific forms, allowing them to blend into our reality without causing instant madness in the observer.
That is a brilliant, terrifying cultural interpretation of the exact same visual data people report today. You see a shadowy, glitchy figure with poorly rendered features wearing a heavy coat and a hat, and the 15th century Turkish mind interprets it as a shapeshifter trying to hold its form together.
It's fascinating.
And this exact echo rings out across the entire globe. In Japan, there is the deeply documented phenomenon of kanashibari.
Which translates to being bound or tied in metal, right?
Exactly. It is the experience of waking up physically immobilized with a dark, suffocating presence looming over the bed. In Botswana, the exact same phenomenon is known as the sebetledi. In Iran, it's the Baktak Jinn, a creature that sits on the sleeper's chest.
It's everywhere.
In Newfoundland, Canada, it's colloquially referred to as the old hag syndrome, where a terrifying invisible weight presses down on the sternum of the sleeper, stealing their breath.
And we can trace the rigorous clinical documentation of this experience back nearly 2,000 years.
Wait, really? 2,000 years?
Yes. Cyrannus of Ephesus, a highly influential Greek physician practicing in the 2nd century AD, clinically documented these specific nocturnal events.
Wow.
He didn't have the vocabulary of modern neuroscience, of course, so he categorized them as demonic attacks.
Sure, that tracks for the era.
However, his clinical observations of the physiological symptoms remain flawlessly accurate today. He noted a profound feeling of physical heaviness, an invisible crushing weight causing a severe choking sensation, and the absolute terrifying inability of the patient to cry out or move their limbs despite being completely conscious.
That's sleep paralysis, perfectly described in the 2nd century. Even the very language we use daily has this ancient terror baked right into its foundation. Think about the word nightmare.
Right, we use it so casually now.
We do. We use it to describe a bad dream where you show up to school without your pants on. But the Old English root of the word is the mare. And a mare wasn't a conceptual dream.
It was a noun.
It was a literal supernatural entity. A demon or goblin that physically rode on people's chests in the dead of night, tormenting them and deliberately hindering their breathing. So the narrative of the nocturnal watcher, the heavy shadow, is ancient.
But we keep coming back to the visual. Why the fedora? Why the 1940s detective trench coat?
Yeah, why those specific clothes?
This is where we have to integrate the physiological with the psychological. We have to look at Carl Jung, the foundational Swiss psychoanalyst, and his concept of archetypes.
Oh, right, the collective unconscious.
Exactly. Archetypes are these universal, inherited, primal symbols and images that are deeply embedded in the collective unconscious of all humanity. And one of the most powerful of these is the archetype of the watcher, or the shadow.
The hidden, repressed, and unknown aspects of ourselves and our environment.
Precisely. So when we analyze the specific clothing, the fedoras, the Homburgs, the heavy, sweeping long coats, we must recognize that these are garments deeply associated with mid-20th century authority.
Right, they aren't just clothes. They are uniforms of a very specific type of stern, unyielding, often punitive authority. When you picture a man in a fedora and a trench coat standing in the shadows, you are culturally primed to think of undertakers, 1940s noir detectives, strict, distant fathers from a bygone era, or old-world authoritarian policemen.
They project a silent, judging, and absolute power.
So the working theory in psychological circles is that when the human mind is thrust into a state of severe biological crisis, low light, physical paralysis, and skyrocketing neurological stress, it desperately tries to render a coherent visual representation of the abstract, formless terror it is experiencing.
Yes. The brain digs into its cultural repository and grabs an archetype that instantly, wordlessly communicates one specific, horrifying concept to the conscious mind.
Which is?
Someone has absolute power over you, and you are entirely helpless.
Wow.
A tall, faceless silhouette shrouded in a wide-brimmed hat and a heavy coat is arguably one of the most efficient, immediately recognizable symbols of ominous, looming authority our collective culture has ever produced.
So if that silhouette has been stalking the human mind since 2nd century Greece, manifesting as a demon to Serenus, a djinn to Turkish treasure hunters, and a man in a fedora to a modern teenager, it implies there is a universal biological hardware glitch happening in the human brain.
The hardware failure is identical, even if the software, the clothes the entity wears, updates based on cultural archetypes.
Exactly. So, what exactly is misfiring inside our nervous system when we fall asleep? Let's dive deep into the biology of paralysis.
To demystify the Hatman, we have to thoroughly dissect the mechanics of sleep paralysis, or SP. According to the rigorous reviews in the medical literature we sourced, SP is not a paranormal event. It is a profound, albeit terrifying, psychophysiological event.
And statistically, it is incredibly common.
Very common. The data indicates that at least 20% of the general global population will experience a severe episode of sleep paralysis at least once in their lives, with a chronic, recurring prevalence rate hovering around 8%.
That is a massive segment of humanity.
It is.
And it almost exclusively happens during the highly vulnerable transition states of human consciousness. When you are lying in bed, slowly drifting off to sleep, that borderland is called the hypnagogic state. When you are in the process of waking up, coming out of deep sleep into awareness, that is the hypnopompic state.
Both very fragile states.
Very. And to prevent us from physically acting out our dreams, say, sprinting out of bed and through a glass window because you were dreaming about being chased, human biology evolved a brilliant built-in safety mechanism.
The off switch.
The off switch. During REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement sleep, when our most vivid dreaming occurs, our brainstem triggers a state of temporary muscle atonia. It literally severs the motor signals, paralyzing all of our voluntary skeletal muscles. Your heart beats, your lungs breathe, but your arms and legs are offline.
And sleep paralysis is precisely what happens when that complex biological sequencing fails. The timing gets misaligned.
So your conscious mind wakes up.
Right. You become entirely aware of your physical environment. You open your eyes, you see your bedroom, you hear the hum of your refrigerator. But the chemical off switch in your brainstem, keeping your body paralyzed, is still fully engaged.
Oh, man.
You are awake, your consciousness is online, but you are trapped inside a paralyzed, unresponsive vessel. The physical panic that sets in is immediate, overwhelming, and deeply primal.
And because your brain is still suspended in this bizarre borderland between waking reality and REM sleep, your visual processing system is still actively running its dream software.
Exactly.
It begins rendering dream imagery and projecting it directly onto the waking room around you. But one of our sources details a highly specific, fascinating neurobiological theory about why we don't just see random dream geometry, but specifically a shadowy humanoid figure.
Yes, and it has to do with a specific region in the right hemisphere of the brain, the temporoparietal junction, or the TPJ.
Right. Break that down for us.
So the right hemisphere of the brain, specifically the right TPJ, is responsible for processing and integrating two incredibly complex, seemingly distinct streams of data.
Okay.
First, our literal spatial self-image. This is how the brain maps the physical boundaries of our own body in three-dimensional space, relying on proprioception and vestibular inputs.
Basically, how you know where your arm is without looking at it.
Exactly. And the second stream of data is our environmental threat detection, our neurological radar for predators in our immediate vicinity.
Okay, so when a person is trapped in sleep paralysis, there is a profound, violent disconnect of this information. You are consciously sending frantic signals to your arms and legs to move, to fight, to escape, but the muscles are locked and aren't returning the expected feedback.
Yes, the brain gets deeply confused by this lack of proprioceptive feedback.
So what happens?
The theory suggests that a massive glitch occurs in that right temporoparietal junction. Because it cannot map your body correctly, the brain takes its own neural map of your self-image, your own bodily template, and accidentally projects it outward into the physical space of the room.
Wait, it hallucinates you.
Yes, but concurrently, because you are paralyzed, your threat detection system is firing wildly. So the brain processes its own projected, externalized self-image as a terrifying, hostile environmental threat.
That is mind-blowing. You are essentially hallucinating a dark, distorted mirror of your own body, and your broken threat detection software is screaming at you that this projection is a monster coming to kill you.
It is a remarkable, catastrophic misfiring of the nervous system's spatial and defensive networks. And we can contextualize this even further by looking at evolutionary biology.
Let's do that.
There is a highly intense, lesser-known evolutionary theory that directly compares human sleep paralysis to a well-documented animal behavior known as tonic immobility, or TI.
Tonic immobility. This is the physiological death-feigning reflex.
Right.
Imagine a prey animal, a rabbit or a possum, that has just been run down and caught in the jaws of a much larger predator. When escape is mathematically impossible, the animal's nervous system takes over and it goes completely limp. It plays dead.
But it isn't relaxed.
No, not at all.
Right.
It is in a state of absolute peaking existential fear combined with a total involuntary paralysis reflex. It is a desperate, last-ditch evolutionary effort to survive, hoping the predator loses interest in seemingly dead prey or to numb the pain of being consumed.
The physiological and neurochemical mechanisms underlying an animal locked in tonic immobility in the wild and a human trapped in sleep paralysis in their bedroom are structurally and chemically nearly identical.
Really?
Yes. The extreme, paralyzing dread, the heavy, restrictive weight on the chest caused by irregular breathing, the hypervigilance.
It's the same thing.
It raises a profoundly disturbing question. Is the Hatman and the entire excruciating experience of sleep paralysis actually a modern manifestation of our most ancient primal prey instincts?
Wow.
When we see the shadow in the doorway, are we simply experiencing the exact ancient neurochemical cocktail of an early hominid being stalked and eaten alive by a nocturnal predator in the dark?
That is heavy. But, I am going to push back on the purely mechanical explanation, though.
Sure, go ahead.
If this is truly just an internal neurological glitch, a misfiring of our self-image at the temporoparietal junction, or a biological prey reflex left over from the Pleistocene era, how do we explain the intense, almost tangible feeling of malevolence? Because every single witness report we reviewed mentions this specific detail. The Hatman isn't just frightening in the way a loud noise is frightening. He radiates pure, concentrated evil. Why does the brain want to torture itself so badly? Why invent the feeling of demonic malevolence?
That's a great question. That feeling of pure evil is the direct result of the amygdala.
A fear center.
Exactly, the brain's primary fear processing center, operating in a vacuum. During an episode of sleep paralysis, you are instantly stripped of your two primary evolutionary defense mechanisms: the ability to move, which is fight or flight, and the ability to vocalize, to call for help.
Both gone.
Simultaneously, because you are lying in a dark room, your incoming sensory data is severely restricted. When the brain is presented with a terrifying lack of contextual information while in a highly vulnerable, paralyzed state, the amygdala goes into absolute unchecked overdrive.
It just panics.
It doesn't just look at a projected shadow in the corner and cautiously think, oh, that ambiguous shape might be a threat, let me gather more data. It defaults to maximum survival mode. It actively fills the darkness with our worst, most fatalistic assumptions.
So the palpable malevolence you feel isn't radiating outward from the shadow in the doorway. It is radiating internally from your own hyper-aroused amygdala, which is desperately screaming at your conscious mind that you are in immediate mortal danger and must do whatever it takes to wake up the body.
That is exactly it.
Okay, so in the context of sleep paralysis, the Hatman is a horrific, involuntary glitch. He is a terrifying but ultimately natural biological misfiring of a sleeping brain trapped between gears.
Yes.
But here is where we must transition into an area that is significantly more alarming. What happens when individuals decide to bypass sleep entirely and intentionally summon this exact entity into their waking lives?
This is where things get truly dangerous.
We're moving out of natural biology and into the chemical nightmare. This is the harrowing realm of diphenhydramine delirium.
This is undoubtedly the most severe and physically dangerous aspect of the phenomena we are examining today.
Yeah, we have to dive deeply into the clinical toxicology reports provided by Ocean's Luxury Rehab, as well as that deeply disturbing cultural documentation regarding the widespread misuse of Benadryl.
Which is the common brand name for the drug diphenhydramine, or DPH.
The statistics surrounding this are genuinely horrifying. The medical report from the rehab center highlights a staggering 87.2% increase in pediatric poison center cases, directly related to intentional DPH overdoses over a recent 9-year tracking period.
87.2%, that's a massive spike.
It is, spurred by reckless online challenges and a morbid curiosity within certain internet subcultures. There is a deeply disturbing trend where teenagers are intentionally swallowing massive, toxic handfuls of over-the-counter allergy medication, specifically to induce these nightmarish hallucinatory states.
Which is just beyond dangerous.
Right. We need to break down the pharmacology here for you. How does a simple pink, over-the-counter pill designed to stop a runny nose possess the chemical capability to turn your physical bedroom into a waking horror movie?
To understand that, we have to look at dosage thresholds. Diphenhydramine is classified as a first-generation antihistamine. In standard therapeutic doses, say 25 to 50 milligrams, which is 1 or 2 pills, it safely and effectively blocks histamine receptors in the body to reduce minor allergy symptoms like sneezing or itching.
And its primary side effect is just mild drowsiness because it crosses the blood-brain barrier.
Right. However, when individuals intentionally consume massive super therapeutic doses, we are talking ranges from 500 milligrams to well over a full gram, which is 20 to 40 pills or more. The drug breaches the blood-brain barrier in overwhelming toxic quantities.
It fundamentally changes.
It does. At this massive threshold, it fundamentally changes its pharmacological classification. It ceases to act primarily as an antihistamine and becomes a highly potent, deeply toxic deliriant.
And this has to do with acetylcholine, right? Acetylcholine is essentially the brain's internal messenger system. It's the traffic light system for memory, arousal, and cognitive function.
Precisely.
So if a massive toxic dose of DPH causes an acetylcholine blockade, it's like removing all the traffic lights in a major city. The electrical signals don't stop, they just crash into each other at high speed, and your brain hallucinates terrifying explanations for the resulting wreckage.
That is a highly accurate analogy. Acetylcholine is a vital foundational neurotransmitter heavily responsible for memory formation, learning, attention, autonomic arousal, and the basic essential communication between billions of neurons.
Right.
When a massive dose of DPH violently blocks the action of acetylcholine across the brain's communication systems are thrown into absolute catastrophic chaos. This chemical sabotage induces a severe, life-threatening medical emergency known clinically as anticholinergic toxidrome.
And we really need to draw a very stark, highly visible line here to separate this specific state of delirium from what the general public might associate with standard psychedelic drugs.
Oh, absolutely. Taking a massive dose of Benadryl is not a psychedelic trip.
Not even remote.
It is a critical distinction. Classic psychedelics, such as psilocybin mushrooms or LSD, act primarily on serotonin receptors. They might dramatically alter your perception of colors, create complex, shifting geometric patterns, or induce profound philosophical shifts in conscious perspective.
And crucially, on classic psychedelics, the user generally retains a core awareness that they are under the influence of a substance. They know they took a drug, and they know the walls aren't actually breathing.
Exactly. Deliriants operating on anticholinergic blockade are entirely different beasts. They create dark, terrifying, indistinguishable from reality hallucinations.
The user suffers a profound, total cognitive breakdown.
They lose all lucidity. They cannot distinguish between their internal, fragmented thoughts and the external physical world. To the delirious mind, the hallucinations are unequivocally real.
The symptoms documented in the trip reports and toxicology files are visceral and frankly horrific. Reading through the rehab data, you see exactly what happens during anticholinergic toxidrome.
What kind of symptoms?
People experiencing severe DPH delirium report seeing massive, translucent spiders crawling rapidly across the walls and ceiling.
The spiders are a very common report.
Yeah, they experience severe formication, which is the incredibly vivid, maddening, tactile hallucination of thousands of insects burrowing, biting, and crawling just underneath their skin.
Horrifying.
Users will sit in an empty room and attempt to smoke entirely non-existent phantom cigarettes, fully pantomiming the action of flicking the ash and inhaling air. They will hold long, fully coherent, multi-sided conversations with friends or family members who are simply not in the room.
Total detachment from reality.
And the auditory hallucinations are chilling. Users report hearing phantom, heavy footsteps echoing in empty hallways, the disembodied, persistent sound of knuckles knocking on doors that no one is behind, and even the distinct, horrifying sound of phantom babies crying in dark corners of the house.
And, of course, this profound chemical chaos is the fertile ground where the shadow entities breed.
Because the visual cortex is compromised.
Right. Because the visual cortex is deprived of normal acetylcholine function, it becomes incapable of properly filtering out visual noise, the static in low-light environments.
Okay.
The brain, frantic for pattern recognition, misinterprets this visual noise. Driven by the sheer chemical panic of the poisoned nervous system, it fills those visual gaps with fear-inducing imagery.
And this is exactly where the Hatman and his accompanying shadow people manifest in the waking physical world.
Yes. The user is plunged into a state of acute, inescapable confusion and paranoia, surrounded by silent, looming phantom entities that feel undeniably physically real.
I want you to deeply understand the reality of this. Taking a massive toxic dose of DPH isn't taking a substance to open the doors of perception or explore a new, colorful world.
Not at all.
It's taking an industrial chemical that systematically destroys your brain's reality firewall. It chemically unplugs your biological ability to differentiate between objective reality and a literal nightmare.
Which leaves you trapped.
Entirely trapped inside a horror movie generated by your own poisoned neurochemistry, with absolutely no mental escape hatch until the drug slowly metabolizes. And beyond the psychological torture, we must emphasize the grave physical reality. This isn't just a scary Friday night experience, it is highly lethal.
The acute medical dangers of an anticholinergic overdose cannot be overstated. Anticholinergic toxicity wreaks absolute havoc on the autonomic nervous system, the system that runs your automatic bodily function.
It attacks everything.
It does. The rehab report details the severe cardiotoxicity involved. Massive doses of DPH can directly block sodium channels in the heart tissue. On a medical monitor, this leads to a dangerous widening of the QRS complex on an electrocardiogram.
Which means?
This electrical disruption heavily predisposes the user to sudden, fatal heart arrhythmias and severe tachycardia, a dangerously, exhaustingly rapid heartbeat that can lead to cardiac arrest.
And the damage extends far beyond the heart. The neurological damage is catastrophic. The erratic, unchecked electrical brain activity frequently induces violent grand mal seizures.
Seizures are very common at those doses.
And there is a deeply concerning high risk of rhabdomyolysis. This is a terrifying condition where your skeletal muscle tissue rapidly breaks down and dies, flooding your bloodstream with a damaging protein called myoglobin.
Which destroys the kidneys.
Exactly. When your kidneys try to filter this massive influx of myoglobin, they become clogged and simply shut down, causing sudden, complete, acute renal failure. Furthermore, because anticholinergics stop your body from sweating, your core body temperature skyrockets into lethal hyperthermia.
You lose the physical ability to urinate. Your mouth becomes as dry as sand.
It is an excruciating, agonizing way to systematically poison your own vital organs.
This severe medical reality brings us to a vital distinction we must make incredibly clear regarding the folklore of the Hatman. We need to distinctly separate the Hatman encountered during sleep paralysis from the Hatman encountered during DPH delirium.
Right, because they share the identical visual silhouette, but the physical experience and the level of danger are entirely different.
That is a critical point. In sleep paralysis, you are frozen. You are in a state of absolute terror, your amygdala is screaming, but you are physically immobilized and therefore safe from physically harming yourself. You are securely in your bed.
But in DPH delirium, your motor functions are entirely online.
Yes. You are completely mobile. You are physically walking around your house or stumbling outside into the street for hours on end, utterly confused, interacting with shadowy figures that aren't there.
Trying to run away from giant spiders? entirely unaware that your heart rate is dangerously erratic and your kidneys might be on the verge of shutting down.
It is quite literally a waking, walking physical nightmare where you are a danger to yourself and everyone around you.
This intense chemical reality forces us to step back and confront the fundamental nature of the phenomena we've explored. When faced with such profound, unexplainable terror, whether stemming from the biological glitch of sleep paralysis or the toxic chaos of DPH delirium, the human mind desperately looks for answers to make sense of the trauma.
And historically, often, those answers lead us away from cold medical reality and straight into the comforting arms of the supernatural.
Right. So how do we bring you back from the edge of this abyss? We need to actively demystify the dark. We need to arm you with natural explanations, critical thinking, and practical defense tactics.
Let's turn to the guidance and analysis provided by the source material, focusing on paranormal demystification. They offer a deeply practical, scientific, harm reduction approach to dealing with these entities.
Because before anyone jumps to the terrifying conclusion that a sentient demon has attached itself to their family or that their bedroom is functionally haunted, we need to rigorously examine environmental triggers.
Exactly. These are real-world, invisible, physical forces that exist in many homes that can perfectly mimic the symptoms of a supernatural encounter.
The first and arguably the most dangerous environmental mimic is carbon monoxide poisoning. A slow, undetected leak from a faulty furnace, an unvented gas stove, or a broken space heater can silently fill a home with an entirely odorless, colorless, invisible gas.
And when inhaled over time, carbon monoxide slowly starves the brain of oxygen.
The symptoms of low-level chronic CO poisoning are striking in how closely they mirror a haunting. Victims report severe, persistent headaches, deep cognitive confusion, a profound, unshakable sense of dread, and eventually highly vivid visual and auditory hallucinations.
Countless supposedly haunted houses where families reported seeing shadow figures stalking the halls have been entirely cured by a simple visit from the local gas company fixing a cracked heat exchanger.
It's wild. And then there is the deeply fascinating phenomenon of infrasound. Have you ever walked into an empty basement or an abandoned building and felt a sudden, irrational drop in your stomach?
Like a creeping sense of terror when you know you are alone.
Yes. Your brain wasn't detecting a ghost. Your body was likely vibrating.
Vibrating.
Yeah. Infrasound consists of extremely low-frequency sound waves existing just below the threshold of human hearing, typically measuring below 20 hertz.
And what causes that?
These powerful low frequencies can be generated by heavy highway traffic miles away, massive industrial HVAC units on the roof of an apartment building, ocean waves, or even strong wind vibrating through old resonant ductwork in a house.
While our ears cannot audibly process infrasound, our physical bodies absolutely feel it. Rigorous scientific studies have demonstrated that these specific massive low-frequency sound waves can literally resonate with the fluid inside the human eyeball.
Wait, it vibrates the eyeball.
It causes a subtle, high-speed physical vibration of the eye itself, which creates distinct optical illusions. These are often perceived as vague, gray, shadowy shapes darting or hovering in the extreme edges of our peripheral vision.
That explains so much.
Furthermore, infrasound directly and negatively impacts the human nervous system. Exposure induces unexplained anxiety, deep sorrow, sudden physical chills, and that distinct evolutionary creeping sensation that someone else, a predator, is standing right behind you.
Think about how all these elements combine. You have pareidolia, which is the human brain's aggressive, evolutionary tendency to find meaningful patterns, specifically human faces and figures, in random visual noise.
Right, seeing faces in clouds.
Exactly. So you have a winter coat hanging on a tall hook in the corner of a dimly lit room. You have the cultural priming of having casually scrolled past an internet article about the Hatman earlier that week.
The pieces are in place.
Now add infrasound. Your physical nervous system is vibrating with the deep anxiety induced by the low-frequency hum of your furnace. Your brain feels the unexplainable dread. It searches the room for the source of the threat. It sees the ambiguous, tall shape of the coat in the corner, and it violently completes the circuit.
It invents the monster in the dark to provide a logical explanation for the extreme physical fear it is experiencing.
The ghost isn't real, but the fear is a biological fact.
This combined understanding of environmental and psychological factors is exactly why the actionable advice provided for dealing with these encounters is so incredibly grounded.
The absolute first line of defense for anyone experiencing severe nighttime hallucinations or feelings of dread in their home: check your physical environment. Install high-quality carbon monoxide detectors and verify their batteries.
Have a professional inspect your furnace, your water heater, and your HVAC systems.
Keep a meticulous log of the times these supernatural events occur. Do they mysteriously coincide with the exact moment the heavy central heater kicks on in the winter?
Improve your daily sleep hygiene to prevent the severe sleep debt that is the primary biological trigger for sleep paralysis.
And simply keep a dimmable, low-wattage nightlight in the bedroom to provide your visual system with reliable, concrete data, stopping the visual static and the resulting pareidolia before it can even start.
But if you do everything right but still find yourself violently ripped from sleep, trapped in the terrifying grip of sleep paralysis, feeling the heavy weight on your chest with the dark shadow looming in the doorway, there are specific tactical ways to break out of the biological trap.
The most important rule: do not panic and try to thrash your whole body. Your brainstem has securely locked down all your major muscle groups. Trying to heave your shoulders or kick your legs will only increase your panic when it fails.
Instead, focus entirely, with every ounce of your willpower, on moving one tiny, seemingly insignificant muscle, a single toe, the tip of your index finger.
Wiggling that tiny peripheral extremity is very often enough to send a sharp, localized signal up the nervous system that alerts the brain to the waking state, breaking the chemical atonia and instantly snapping you out of the total paralysis.
Additionally, utilizing tactical breathing techniques can save you from the overwhelming terror of the hallucination. Box breathing is a technique used by first responders and military personnel.
4 seconds in, hold 4, out 4, hold 4.
Exactly. It involves inhaling slowly for 4 seconds, holding that breath in for 4 seconds, exhaling slowly for 4 seconds, and holding your lungs empty for 4 seconds.
It's not just a distraction either.
No, it is a proven biological method to manually override the autonomic nervous system. It physically forces your racing heart rate to slow down, and crucially, it bypasses the amygdala's panic response, reassuring the brain that you are safe.
This allows you to calmly endure the terrifying hallucination for the few moments it takes until the chemical paralysis naturally fades.
Looking at all this rigorous science, we have to ask a final philosophical question. Why is it so incredibly hard for people to accept these biological, chemical, and environmental explanations?
Yeah, why do victims of these encounters so often and so fiercely resort to calling this spirit possession, demonic oppression, or spiritual intrusion?
Because the truth is a profound psychological injury. Relying on the supernatural is a highly effective protective psychological defense mechanism.
How so?
When a person is lying entirely helpless in their own bed, betrayed by the very nervous system that is supposed to protect them, surrounded by utterly flawless, three-dimensional hallucinations generated entirely by their own neurochemistry, it is deeply, existentially destabilizing.
That makes total sense. To accept that your own brain, the seat of your consciousness, has the capability to effortlessly create such a flawless, inescapable torture chamber without your consent is a terrifying, alienating concept.
Right. It feels much safer, strangely enough, to blame an external demon or an ancient djinn.
If it's a demon standing in the doorway, it is an external threat. You can banish an external threat, you can pray against it, you can burn sage, it has mythological rules you can follow.
Exactly.
But if it's a profound internal neurochemical failure, you are forced to look in the mirror and confront the absolute terrifying fragility of your own consciousness. You're forced to realize that reality is a very thin chemical illusion.
Exactly that. But reframing this terrifying entity as a biological anomaly, deeply understanding the mechanics of acetylcholine blockade, grasping the spatial mapping glitch of the right temporoparietal junction, recognizing the amygdala's fear overdrive is the ultimate weapon against the terror.
Knowledge strips the Hatman of his dark power.
It turns a demonic, supernatural watcher into a fascinating, highly complex, albeit frightening, medical symptom.
So what does this massive journey all mean for us? Let's bring this deep dive to a close. We started in the deep, isolated forests of ancient Anatolia, following treasure hunters, encountering glitchy, shape-shifting jinn trying to wear human suits.
We moved to the 2nd century AD, where Greek physicians diligently documented the suffocating physical weight of the demonic nightmare.
We unpacked the incredible, intricate neurobiology of a paralyzed, sleeping brain. We explored how a microscopic timing error and a glitch in our right hemisphere spatial mapping system can accidentally project our own self-image into the bedroom as a hostile threat,
inadvertently triggering a primal, evolutionary tonic immobility reflex left over from our days as prey animals.
And we waded deeply into the dark, highly dangerous and tragically rising waters of anticholinergic delirium, examining how massive toxic overdoses of everyday allergy medication violently block the brain's vital communication pathways.
Stripping away our biological reality firewall and unleashing lethal waking nightmares.
We have looked at silent killers like carbon monoxide, the invisible anxiety of infrasound, and the deep cultural priming that gives the shadow its signature mid-century hat.
Ultimately, whether you believe the Hatman is an ancient, lingering myth, a misremembered shadow warped by infrasound, or a severe, terrifying misfiring of a poisoned neuron, he represents something foundational and universal about the human condition.
He represents our deepest, most primal vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
He is the exact shape our fear takes when the lights go out, the room goes quiet, and we violently lose control of our own bodies.
I want to leave you with a final, lingering, slightly provocative concept to mull over. It's a thought pulled from an anonymous, easily overlooked comment deep within our archive.
Oh, I know.
We've spent this entire hour dissecting the Hatman as a figure of absolute terror, a biological glitch, a hallucinated demon, a symptom of lethal chemical poison. But some witnesses who have survived multiple encounters don't see him that way at all.
Really? How do they see him?
Some people report that his towering, silent presence, while undoubtedly ominous and terrifying, isn't inherently evil. They believe his specific job is to appear during moments of severe biological or psychological crisis, to literally scare them away from making terrible, destructive life choices.
It is a deeply fascinating, almost comforting reinterpretation of the trauma.
If we fully accept the neurobiological premise that the Hatman is ultimately a projection of our own right brain threat detection system, then logically, perhaps he isn't a monster at all.
Think deeply about that. Perhaps the Hatman is the human brain's ultimate, desperate survival mechanism. When you are pushing your physical body to the absolute breaking point through chronic, destructive sleep deprivation, extreme, unmanaged psychological stress, or lethal toxic chemical abuse, your mind desperately needs a way to force you to stop.
It needs an intervention that you cannot ignore.
And what better, more effective way to shock you into instantly changing your behavior than by conjuring the most primal, terrifying, culturally resonant authority figure imaginable? The Hatman might just be a terrifying shadowy mask your own subconscious puts on when it urgently needs to shock you into staying alive.
So the next time you wake up at 3 a.m., entirely paralyzed.
Feeling a weight on your chest, and you see that tall, shadowy silhouette in the wide-brimmed hat standing silently in your doorway. Ask yourself not what it wants to do to you, but what your own mind is desperately trying to warn you about.